Hi, and welcome to this EBS-50 tutorial about updating the firmware of the several parts of your ESL system. I'm Jurgen Rodenhuis, I'm one of the developers of the ESL server software, and I'm here to talk to you about updating the ESL labels, the EBS-40 base stations, and the EBS-50 smart base station. And let's start at the lowest level one, your ESLs. Your ESLs will be used quite a lot. So, if we have ESLs, we want to make sure that they are up to date with the latest information and the latest firmware for the best performance of your hardware. If you have downloaded the EBS toolkit, and there is another episode about the EBS toolkit, you will have received a zip file. It has a folder with all of the firmware files for all type of ePaper and TFT ESLs. Now, in front of my desk, I have a 3 number of ESLs from the PE292 variety, and all 3 of them have an outdated piece of firmware, and we want to update it. So, what we do is we go to ebs50.local, and we go to the ESLs page. We log into the system. We go to ESLs. And since these are 292s, we can just type it in to find them in the list. And in the default screen, you won't notice the firmware version because it's not that important for day-to-day operations. So if you want to know it, you can say, show me all the details. And let's see, in the column version, it will give the current version. If it's not showing anything, make sure to request the latest settings so that these ESLs tell the base station and the ESL server all of their latest information. Here we see them reporting in how they're doing. They're telling what scan channels they have, what variety they are, and the one we wanted to see, the version. Now, we see that this one is running on ILVV159, another on 164, and yet another on 166. But let's take a look at the toolkit that we downloaded. Go to Downloads and the Toolkit, and then in the Firmware folder and ePaper ESLs, we'll find the firmware for this type, the PE292. And the latest is ILVV0169, which is newer than all 3 of them here. So, we've already selected them in the list. Let's say firmware update in the drop-down menu. Then we can click Go, and it will ask us, okay, where can I find that file? Well, it's in the ePaper PE292, and then this hex file. And we press open, and basically that means that in the background, that file is being uploaded from my computer to the EBS-50, and the EBS-50 will then transmit that wirelessly to all 3 of these PE292s I've got on my desk. This is an action that can take quite a bit of time because the firmware file is relatively large, and since we're using a low power protocol with a small bandwidth, we need to be a little bit patient. But in the meantime, the EBS-50 will just keep it in storage. So if you select even more ESLs, you can say, I want those to update as well, and it will go pretty fast. Now, the updating system is completely safe. The ESLs work with a bootloader section and an operating system section. The bootloader is a piece of uneditable software embedded on the device itself, which tells it how to boot up, how to update an image, stuff like that. And the operating system, that is the part where all of the newer updates are taking place, like if we add other channels, or if we add just a different type of screen in newer units, or small changes in the software to make it faster or more power efficient. Well, that OS, if there is any issue during updating, then the bootloader is staying safe. If something goes wrong, it reverts back to what it was before, and nothing will break. So the updating is in progress right now. The status screen on the ESL server says firmware update started. One of them just reported, I'm going offline. Basically that means that the update is completed and the unit is reporting to the ESL server, I'm going offline for a second. I'm going to reboot, and once I do, I'll come back with the latest firmware installed. And I said if there is any issue, it will revert back. It will tell the ESL server something went wrong, and then you can fix it. But the unit will not completely disappear, so don't worry about it. So now a couple of moments have passed, and all three now have the status firmware update OK. Well, just to be sure, we can also say we want to show all details. And as we can see, under firmware version, oh, this one has just come online. There it goes. It just reported. It was 66, and it just reported I'm now at 0169. And all three units are. So that's how you update an ESL. That's easy enough. Let's go one step more difficult. Let's go to the base stations. Now, to update a base station, you obviously first go to the base station tab in the ESL server. So we go to base stations, and we wait for the menu to pop up. And the EBS-50 that we have here, if we click configure, we can see that it's running firmware version 62. So let's go and check if we have a newer one in the toolkit that we downloaded. So we'll say, go to firmware, EBS-4X. Well, there's the 62 that is running now, and there's also 64A. Awesome. Let's open that one up. Is this the file we want to use? Yes, it definitely is. So let's click upload. The firmware is uploaded to the EBS-50 device, and it will now update the firmware on the unit itself. And once it is done, it will report back to us, I am done. Well, it said there's a strike through 62, so basically that means I've uploaded it, it's done, there's a check mark, everything has been updated. So let's go back to the list. And here we can see 7D4. Currently it's not connected. Basically that means is the firmware file has been uploaded to the device is making the changes, and it's restarting its hardware to make sure that it is functioning correctly. And as with the ESLs before, if during that reboot anything is wrong with the firmware file, the bootloader will make sure that nothing will break, and it will revert back to the system or the firmware version that it had before. So just give it a couple of moments to process all of this new information, and once it's done, it will reconnect to the EBS-50 automatically. So now the EBS-50 has rebooted and installed the software. We can see that it is now back to connected, and if we check out the settings through the configuration page, we can see that the firmware file that we just uploaded has been properly installed. So now let's go for the big one, updating the EBS-50 itself. Now, since the EBS-50 is both a base station and a Linux computer hosting the ESL server software, the firmware for that device is basically an entire image for a computer system. So what we want to do is we go to Advanced System Settings, and then we go to Update Firmware, and the easiest one is to just upload a Mender image, which is the entire image of a EBS-50 system. We can just choose a file. I already downloaded the latest one. I've got it on a USB stick, so I'll just make sure that the file can be uploaded. I'll open the file, and you can see that it starts uploading to the EBS-50. Now this Mender file is quite big, a couple of 100 megabytes big, so this may take a while. Once it's done with uploading, it will install the latest version, and all of your current links, database settings, all of your personalized settings are on a different logical disk within the EBS-50, and they will not go away. They will all be maintained, and they will all survive the update, so don't you worry about any of your settings going lost. The only things that are updating are the firmware for the base station part, and of course the application, the ESL server application UI that we're seeing here is getting updated. So we'll be back in a minute once it's updated, and then I'll show you a second way of updating it, since some of you are already wondering, well, I can't actually upload a file to that device because I hidden it on a secret network and I want to use a different method. That's also possible. I'll see you in a bit. So after a while the file has uploaded, and we see a status image that says firmware installation in progress, and once it's done it says the firmware update has been completed. Please reboot the system for the changes to take effect. So we simply click apply near the reboot button. It says the system has started rebooting, and now the hardware will reboot. It will install this new image and then boot up the hardware and the new software. So this may take a minute, minute and a half. So let's just take a look at the system itself. I can see physically on the unit that it is starting its boot again. So all of the lights are flashing. The power LED is the only one that's burning during a reboot, and it burns orange. So it's booting up the onboard Linux computer, and once that's all booted up, it will start the new EBS-50 firmware version as well. And an easy trick is to start the EBS Finder app to check on our network what base stations are online. And well, wouldn't you know it, it's saying that it's already online. And when it was last seen, well, just now. So if I now click this home icon, I should be going back to EBS50.local. And if everything has booted up and is listening for new requests, we should be greeted with our login screen. And here we are. It has updated. We're back at the login screen. So we can log in with our settings, and here we go. The system is back online and updated, and in EBS Finder we can see that the firmware version we uploaded, RC6, is also being reported to the outside world. Now, I already said that if you don't have a connection from the outside to the inside and you want to update them in a more hardware fashion way, well, that's quite easy. What you need to do is take that Mender file that we uploaded earlier, and instead of uploading it to the system, we're going to put it on a USB disk. You need to make sure that that disk is formatted as a FAT32 file system. Place the Mender file directly into the root directory, and then we can take that disk. First, let's eject it properly so we don't have any issues with the file corruptions or anything. We can take that thumb drive and place it in the USB port of the EBS-50. We simply plug it in, and we go to the same place that we updated it with our file upload by going to Advanced, System Settings, update the firmware, and instead of uploading the file, we can say fetch the USB Mender image. And once you press fetch, it starts to look at the stick, and it's correctly seeing this update. Well, we already updated the unit, but if you want to do it yourself, this would be the point where you press apply, and basically the same steps occur. It says firmware update started, and once it's done, it will ask you to restart the system. So basically it's the same, but instead of uploading a file through an Ethernet connection or Wi-Fi connection, you simply use a USB stick and manually insert it into the unit. And that is how you update ESLs, EBS-40s, and the EBS-50. Thank you for watching this tutorial. There are other tutorials in this playlist as well. You can check the description for the links. If you want to contact Opticon because you have other questions, feel free to do so. Our contact details are in the description as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.